Hello and welcome to Team 6's Assignment 3 Risk Management Plan. In today's presentation, we will be presenting the new proposal of the Melbourne to Sydney high-speed rail system. But first, I'd like to introduce Team 6's members. Presenting to you today is Darren, Lachlan, and myself, Reem. In today's agenda, we will provide an overview of the City Connect train concept, the key project objectives, an overview of the risk management plan, the main challenge covered in the feasibility study, a comprehensive risk management assessment, model, and matrix. So let's get started, shall we? The Australian Federal Government has issued a request for proposal, RFP, to build a Melbourne to Sydney high-speed rail system. The proposed construction commencement date is 2030. The vision is to construct and operate a high-speed train network like the French TGV network with train speeds capable of 320 km per hour. The TGV train is a brand of the TGV Inouï, translated from French as the extraordinary train. Manufactured by Alstom, the trains and train system are very well known for more comfort, services, and connectivity. Alstom trains are already widely used in Australia. The proposed Melbourne to Sydney City Connect train route will be along the southeast coast, taking advantage of the spectacular sea views, farmland, bushland, native forest, and glimpses of the Australian Alps. The proposal will include 13 new coastal train stations, 2 major upgrades for existing stations, 535 kilometres of additional rail track, 13 major river crossings, 56 bridges, and 13 major road crossings. The existing rail network in Victoria from Melbourne to Barnsdale will be upgraded to accept the TGV high-speed trains with speeds of up to 320 km per hour, along with upgrades to the existing rail network from Sydney to Nowra. I will now pass you on to Darren.
Thanks, Reem. Hi, I'm Darren Dawkins. So why does Melbourne and Sydney need this new rail link? Now, just a short history on Australian rail transport. The Afghan Railway commenced construction in 1878 and was opened in 1929. The train was a vital link for passengers and freight between Adelaide, Port Augusta and Alice Springs. Now, today's Ghan is just a tourist train, operates from Adelaide to Alice Springs through to Darwin, and it carries an estimated 35,000 people annually. Rail links are vital to Australia, especially Tourism Australia. The federal government's proposal for a link between Melbourne and Sydney is essential for the future of tourism. The key objectives for this project would be to create local jobs in the towns that the train will run through. So there'll be new hotels, shops, tourist facilities, and local businesses will benefit from the increased trade. There'll be new jobs in construction, so the new railway, the roads, the bridges, the signals. There'll be new jobs in the local towns for constructing supermarkets, restaurants, schools, housing. There'll be new jobs for the tourism industry, tour operators. So there'll be water activities, hiking, tour buses to the beaches. And one of the main features is the lifestyle options for families. They can move to the coastal towns, but still have the options to work from Sydney or Melbourne. The other opportunities would be for retirees to move to coastal towns, but still have rail connections to family. We have a number of tools to assist us in analysing the project's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. In this case, we'll use a SWOT analysis. It will help make strategic decisions whether we go ahead or change the project scope. Now, for this project, the strengths are that it's built a better transport system for Victoria and New South Wales. It will connect Melbourne and Sydney via coastal towns. It will open the smaller towns to tourism operations. Opens lifestyle options for coastal living. Project weaknesses are securing the land for the projects, and also the cost. Train systems are expensive to install. Now, there are plenty of opportunities. The train could potentially have a freight carriage for freight deliveries to the local towns, saving on transport costs in the long run. There's a potential to divert to Phillip Island, and there's also a potential in the future to connect to Canberra. Considered threats are state laws and legislations, cost overruns, obtaining the land for the train route, and being respectful of the traditional lands. To give a brief overview of the project, on the Victorian side, which is the lower map, there's an existing rail link between Melbourne Southern Cross and Barnsdale. It's a 278 kilometre, 3-hour journey. The top right map shows the New South Wales side. There's a train from Sydney Central Station to Nowra, approximately 3.5-hour journey. Now, in between the two towns, there's no existing rail system, so a new 535 kilometre rail section will need to be constructed for the high-speed trains. In addition to the new track, on the Victoria side, we'll need to install new stations at Nowra, Lakes Entrance, Orbost and Genoa. On the New South Wales side, we'll need to install new stations at Eden, Pambula, Bega, Central Tilba, North Narooma, Turos Head, Maruya, Batesman Bay, Lake Taburi and Milton. An initial feasibility study has highlighted a number of considerations for the risk assessment. So where possible, the new rail link to use existing rail trails were available. Upgrade existing track rather than procure land and install new lines. Consider reducing the rail level crossings or tunnels. We need to identify the traditional owners and obtain permissions. Consider the new route of the rail system through towns or on the outskirts of towns. Consider access from highways for construction. Consider the topography, the hills, the wetlands. The route survey, whether it will be a single track or dual track. We need to consider the planning applications and planning approvals. We'll now discuss the project stakeholders. For a large-scale project such as the high-speed train from Sydney to Melbourne, we'll need to include the government entities, both at a federal and state government level, Department of Transport, the rail authorities, the Australian Rail Track Corporation, Victoria Rail Track, Transport New South Wales, the private sector partners, construction companies, train manufacturers, financial institutions, and the service providers. Also the local community along the proposed route, the residents, the businesses, the environmental protection authorities, planning authorities, rail industry associations, the environmental and community advocacy groups, the tourism boards, and the Chamber of Commerce. I'd now like to pass on to Lachlan to discuss the risk assessment.
Thank you, Darren. To ensure the risks associated with this project are appropriately identified and controlled, this risk management plan has adopted the principles, framework, and process described in the ISO Risk Management Guidelines. Of particular importance is the risk management process outlined in Clause 6 of these guidelines, in which risks are identified, analysed, evaluated, and reduced to acceptable risk levels with risk management and controls. Critical to the success of any risk management plan is that the risk identification process, as well as the monitoring of identified and controlled risks, remains continuous throughout the project. This is to ensure rapid adaptation to changes as they arise. To assist in the identification and management of the risks associated with this project, we have utilised the PESTEL framework. as well as the SWOT analysis previously discussed by Darren. The PESTEL framework is a tool used to draw attention to several environments that are known to have potential effects on organizations and projects. These environments are political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental. The results of this analysis are displayed here. In conjunction with the PESTEL framework, as Darren previously discussed, we have also completed a SWOT analysis. This identifies the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats associated with the project. The threat identification provided by this analysis encouraged greater focus to be placed on the political, economic, social, and environmental environments surrounding the project when conducting the broad brush risk assessment. Additionally, the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities identified in the SWOT analysis provided insight into how the identified risks can be controlled and managed. In conducting the project's preliminary risk assessment, the displayed risk matrix was used. Each risk was ranked for the likelihood of the event occurring and the potential consequences the occurrence of the event would have on the successful completion of the project. The risk ranking is then categorized as low, moderate, high, or critical for each event. This categorization provides insight into the amount of resources that should be allocated towards the management and monitoring of the event. While there are no events ranked as low risk prior to controls being put in place in this risk assessment, it is important that when low risk events are identified, they are not excluded from the risk assessment or risk register. As environments change, so too do the risks and their rankings, and maintaining awareness of all risks allows for their effective monitoring and management. The broad brush risk assessment identified 3 items as having substantial associated risks to the project. These items were the procurement of land and access permission for the high-speed rail corridor and infrastructure, project funding, and construction. The risks associated with land procurement were predominantly identified through the social aspect of the PESTEL framework, with controls revolving around the project's strengths able to lower the risk rankings from medium to high down to a residual risk ranking of low. This was primarily through communication and consultation. The political and economic environments identified stakeholders to be of critical importance to the completion of the project, with the residual risk to the project, should major stakeholders withdraw from the project, still requiring high delegation of resources and continual monitoring. Environmental considerations were of predominant concern for construction, with both environmental events' residual risk ranking after controls are implemented being categorized as still moderate risk. I will now pass this presentation to Reem for our recommendations. Reem?
There are 4 key recommendations to consider prior to commencing the City Connect high-speed rail project from Melbourne to Sydney. First is procurement and land access management, which includes establishing multiple routes to mitigate landowner resistance, conducting a feasibility study from 2024, as well as prioritising community and traditional landowner consultation. Second is infrastructure compatibility and funding, which assesses existing infrastructure for compatibility and maintaining stakeholder communication to prevent funding loss. Third is construction management, which includes coordinating with key stakeholders, dividing the project into manageable stages, implementing stringent quality control measures, monitoring supply chain, and conducting environmental assessments. Last but not least is risk monitoring, which includes continuously monitor weather predictions and implementing proactive risk management strategies. By following these recommendations, the Melbourne to Sydney high-speed rail project can manage risks, ensure timely completion, and minimise adverse impacts. Considerations for adaptation include regular review of risk registers, scenario planning and sensitivity analysis, continual improvement of risk management processes, and more specific adaptations include integrating the climate risk assessment using NARCLIM data, implement innovative locomotive fuel management for efficiency and emission reduction. Flexibility and adaptation are vital for managing risks in the dynamic environment of the City Connect high-speed train project. In summary, the Melbourne to Sydney high-speed rail project is a significant opportunity to transform transportation infrastructure in Australia. With careful planning, stakeholder collaboration, and robust risk management practices, City Connect has the potential to deliver lasting benefits for generations to come. Thank you for listening.